Now, how do these laws affect women's lives? I will give you a few examples of discriminatory laws around the world, and we had compiled a report in 1995 and updated in 2000, calling on governments to repeal discriminatory laws. In 1984, Algeria adopted a family code that restricts women's rights in marriage by providing for polygamy, mandating wife obedience, and restricting grounds for divorce for women. Now, people think that all these laws that you hear about in Saudi Arabia, where women can't drive, or, etc., only until recently women in Kuwait could not vote, that these are old laws, but in fact they're not. These are laws that have been instituted in the last 20 years, sometimes in the last 15 years. So you just see the tremendous backlash against women's rights. It is said that in the late 80s, when this law in Algeria was being debated, that men in parliament debated for days as to how long the stick with which a man was allowed to beat his wife should be. Again, we were all born and working productively at that time. In some countries such as India, Malaysia, and Tonga, a woman often has no legal protection from rape by her husband. The penal code in Algeria, for instance, permits husbands to use physical violence to chastise their wives as long as it does not result in grievous harm, which is defined as loss of sight, hearing, power of speech, facial disfigurement, or other life-threatening injuries. There is discrimination in marriage age in many, many countries around the world where it is eligible for men to marry, but when it comes to a girl, that age usually slips way below the age of 18 in contravention to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which, by the way, the United States has not signed or ratified, which is a huge shame and crime. Polygamy, as we know, is allowed by law in many countries, including Mali, the Sudan, Tanzania, to name a few, and in practice in the state of Utah here in the U.S. Wife obedience laws exist exactly in a number of countries, including the Sudan in 1991 and Yemen in 1992, where the law explicitly provides that wives must be available to their husbands for sex and that they cannot leave the marital home without permission from her husband. In Chile, marital partnership must be headed by the husband. And even in Israel, unlike a man, a Jewish woman has no right to divorce as governed by rabbinical law and sanctioned by state law. And the list goes on. Obviously, you must wonder, like, why are we rattling these laws? But what it does is that it really shows the status of women around the world in law and in practice and in culture and religion. And it has been very, very difficult to change these laws because of total lack of political will and resistance really at the highest levels of government. Obviously, one of the most extreme forms of violence in terms of the reproductive rights or bodily integrity is the issue of female genital mutilation, and I won't go into that right now. Equality Now has been doing a lot of work with grassroots organizations around the world to eradicate FGM. I think that among all of the issues on which we work, this is the one issue where we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Nevertheless, 6,000 girls a day are still subjected to FGM, which leads to severe psychological and physical consequences throughout the girl and the woman's life. 2 weeks ago in El Salvador, how, like Dakota, South Dakota, abortion is strictly prohibited with no exceptions for rape or incest or the mother being at risk. So you read this article and you just shudder to think that is this what is going to happen in this country where women's uteruses actually belong to the government, belong to the prosecutorial arm of the law, that women are actually separate from their bodies and would actually could wind up in jail for exercising their fundamental human rights.